Of course, unsurprisingly, but the Celtics just killed the undefeated streak that the Cavs were on, 15-0. Boston has a parade of threes. The Boston 3 party is back, and they win by 3. Cavs cover, backdoor cover, last second. That was fun for the bettors out there. But let's get into it. 120-117, Celtics win. How'd you feel watching this? Were you surprised at all about how this game eventually turned out?
I guess I was a little bit surprised just because the Celtics have been so good about locking down in late game situations. And so I was a little surprised that they let it get away from them so quickly, especially in that first half. I don't remember the exact deficit that existed after the first 2 quarters, but it was pretty big. I think they were down definitely double digits by the end of the first half. And obviously, kudos to them. They stormed back. They got it pretty close. Unfortunately, Darius Garland was just completely off the entire game. Donovan Mitchell didn't really wake up until the second half, but I mean, he looked fantastic. Evan Mobley and Jared Allen continue to be amazing this season. Their 2-man game is really fun to watch. But the Celtics are the Celtics. They will rain threes. They love chucking threes. A lot of people hate that about their offense, which I'm personally not against it. I mean, if you're hitting threes, I get taking them. You know what I mean?
Can we actually talk about this?
Yeah, absolutely. It's like
because we don't do the hot takey stuff. Like, we're not people who are just chasing shit on social media. So I actually want to park here for a second because I've had a difficult time with this, right? Because I embrace the data, the analytics that says, and yes, we've been moving toward a 3-point shooting generation, so to speak. We're here emphatically. Missoula ball is a big part of this. It's not just shooting threes for the purpose of shooting threes, although that may feel like it, but there's a method to the madness in terms of creating that space, whipping the ball around, getting to open threes, and making teams have to make a tough decision. Am I going to jump out and sell out to this corner 3, or am I going to let a layup go, or potentially a drive and kick to another shooter, and all these different things? The reason why I've had a difficult time with this, though, is because aesthetically, it can get kind of annoying. Like, just from a human standpoint, just watching the product, and it's like, fuck, man, how many threes are we going to see, right? But yeah. I also get it from a strategic element. So this doesn't bother you that much. Why is that?
So I understand from the aesthetic standpoint, because it can get very boring to watch because it's just over and over again. Someone's driving into the paint. Everything collapses. They're kicking it out. They're swinging it around until they get somebody as open as possible and they hit the 3 often. And that's just what happened tonight. And that's what happened in the Knicks game in their season opener. They crushed the Knicks by doing that. And so it's aesthetically very boring. I will admit that. But I don't have a huge issue with it because I'm if you're seeing that you are able to win games, if you hit something I think it's 20 or more 3-pointers in a contest, you're going to go for that. That's sort of the easy way to a victory, it seems for Boston at this point in the regular season. Do I think that they can rely on that in the postseason? No. I don't think that they're going to be able to just keep chucking threes in the postseason. They're going to see better defenses. The Oklahoma City Thunder come to mind as a team that's very defense oriented, assuming hypothetically this is the finals matchup between those two teams. If they end up meeting in the postseason, I don't see that working for Boston. I don't see it working for them against a lot of Western Conference teams, to be honest with you, because that is just an incredibly strong conference. I think right now, though, it's working. I don't see why you deter from that. And I personally don't have an issue with it because they're hitting. It's not like they're chucking and missing a bunch of threes. And it's wow, you really have nothing else to go to as an offense. But I think a lot of the boredom from it, other than it just being very annoying, comes from the fact that it's just so calculated. You know what they're doing.
Right.
As soon as you see one of them just driving into the paint, the ball is just going to start ping-ponging around and just eventually end up a 3. And it's just so calculated down to the exact, everything. Yeah. And it is just so purely Missoula ball that it's just It's annoying to watch as the opposing team, but I know Boston fans eat it up because they're
Yeah,
like, it's so easy to just watch this team play on offense. Um, yeah, I don't really have an issue with it. I mean, it sucks that that's how the Knicks got like completely obliterated
that's true. Yeah.
to open the season, but it's one of those things where it's like it happens. And Boston again, they can't rely on it as a consistent source of their offense. They're going to have to actually drive into the paint sometimes.
Yeah, it's demoralizing, right? To watch sometimes if you're the other side, if you bet against them also.
Hmm.
I think when it comes to the postseason, it's interesting because I wish that we really saw them tested last year, right? Because we didn't get that. And part of it was because, yeah, they were so good, but also just health. And health is a big part of why they were able to just go through the playoffs with relative ease last year. We didn't get to see them against the Knicks in the playoffs. Now, I don't think the Knicks would have won that series, but I do think it would have been at least a pretty deep series. Like, deep to me is six or more. I feel like we could have gotten to six. I actually think if Jimmy Butler were healthy, the Heat could have gotten to six the way that they won one game. And you figure, all right, with Jimmy Butler and Terry Rozier and Duncan Robinson at full strength, like those guys were hurt. Duncan Robinson was hurt, but played through it, but barely. Like he was a shell of what he was doing earlier in that year, where he looked like to some, an MIP candidate. And then obviously you have the series rather against Indiana, where Indiana's young. They're in this playoff run with this core for the first time, and they're in a lot of these games late, and they can't close any of them.
Yeah.
Like and Boston, to their credit, a lot of this was out Kristaps Porzingis, but at the same time, and this year they don't have Kristaps Porzingis at all yet. So I feel like we were kind of robbed of that, but they got their first title anyway. And I just want to see like how good this Cleveland Cavaliers team could be if we could toss to them for a second. Because going into the year, I was very high on them. I was like over 47 and a half wins. This team can be really, really good. I think, and this was my projection before the season started, 2 seed, 50-55 win range. There's potential for more than that, but at least there. And I was like, they could probably get to like the semifinals. And then I still think the Knicks could take them out. This was preseason. Now I'm second guessing that. And it's still very early and we still have to see what happens. And I still think there's room for the Knicks to grow their defense. But I think Cleveland's legit is the point. And I want to see these two teams, the Celtics and the Cavs, in a playoff series if we can get there. It could really be the Eastern Conference Finals or semifinals, depending on how the bracket shakes out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you and maybe like two or three more people I saw in the preseason were probably the only people that were very high on them just
Yeah.
because they were one of those teams that didn't make any like big splashes in the off season, but were relying on their roster coming in with a lot of continuity.
They made one big splash. Kenny Atkinson, head coach.
Oh, well, oh my gosh, of course. Yeah, exactly. And so, which, it's great because JB Bickerstaff, he's thriving in Detroit. So it kind of
Yeah.
worked out for everybody.
Yeah.
But I am so impressed with the way that they sort of bounced back from that, era of the team with JB Bickerstaff leading them, where there was obviously some sort of like, not miscommunication, but it just felt like there was a disconnect between his coaching style and the rest of the team. And now you're getting that previously untapped potential starting to get unlocked, especially when you look at Evan Mobley finally looking like, all right, like you're a legitimate part of this like monster of a starting lineup on both ends of the floor. The question with him is, can you stay consistent throughout the rest of the season and into the postseason as well with that level of play? Same with Jared Allen. We've seen both of them get shut down by Mitchell Robinson multiple times, throughout their seasons together on the floor in the postseason as well. So I'm very curious to see them and how they play against teams with bigs like Robinson in the postseason. But I think that the Cavs have that continuity. They have depth, which is what makes, I think, a lot of the really, really good teams in the NBA to start this season great, is the fact that a lot of teams that just felt like they had enough with what they had going into this season instead of making big trades like the Knicks did, for example, they have really reaped the benefits of that continuity. And I think
Yeah.
the Cavs are a perfect example of that. They stuck to their guns. They said, we will just try to work on fixing the problems that we had from last season into this season. Their defense has been stellar. Their offense has been great. Darius Garland is hitting another level that I didn't know he could hit. Not tonight, but in general,
Yeah.
in general, he is. Had he been how he's been this entire season tonight, I think the Cavs probably leave Boston undefeated still, which might be a spicy take, but I mean, it was a pretty close game, and I think had he just played normally and without it seemed like pressure on himself, it would have been a lot more competitive. But yeah, the Cavs are absolutely legitimate. Obviously, I think a lot of people, a lot of Knicks fans are waiting to see what they look like in the postseason to know if they're actually legitimate.
Yeah.
But they have all the makings of a contender. They have great defense, they have depth, they have the star power, and they have excellent guard play. Very, very hard to see who stops them in the Eastern Conference, other than right now, I would say Boston.
Yeah. And Boston didn't have Porzingis, so we didn't see him. We also didn't see Max Strus or Dean Wade or Karis LeVert or Isaac Okoro, all of whom would be rotation players for the Cavaliers, and that's not a small thing. I was also impressed that even though there was the 3-point barrage inevitably by the Celtics, because there is one, it feels like every game, they averaged before today 51 3-point attempts per game, which I have a point about that I'm going to make in a second that's kind of out of left field, but like it's nuts. They only got to 41 today. Only. That's still 10 a quarter. But only.
Yeah.
22 of 41. Cleveland, despite the fact that they were 10 of 29. So just pure math. You're talking about a lot more. Like, I'm not going to do the math right now off the top of my head. Yeah, I am. 36-point difference in terms of 3-point makes. Advantage Boston. It's always advantage Boston. Cleveland was able to make it a game when it looked like they were going to fold in the third quarter, or a lot of teams would. They made that run. Evan Mobley was great. Just the whole game, but also in the third quarter, he was spectacular. Donovan Mitchell sort of took it from there. Jared Allen was, doing what he was supposed to do in the paint. I thought that he would have an even better game, but Boston did a good job of kind of limiting his offensive impact, specifically on like the offensive glass, where he only had 3 rebounds. Evan Mobley actually picked up some of that slack. And then ultimately, you needed other guys to make plays. Cleveland had their bench played pretty well, but they didn't go very deep. They had 8 guys, all of whom played 25 plus minutes, except for Sam Merrill, who played 19 and started. So I think Boston plays like a video game. Like when you're young and you're playing 2K and you're playing somebody even younger than you and all they want to do is shoot threes, like, and it's annoying, but they end up going like, I don't know, 12 for 30, which is a good percentage. And it's like, well, shit, I'm posting you up, old school, right? I'm posting you up. I'm doing all these different things. I'm getting dunks on you, whatever, but you're beating me because you're just jacking up all these threes. I think that's what people feel like when they watch the Celtics. That's what maybe this is just PTSD from my childhood, but I feel like I'm watching kids play 2K from back in the day where like before we had this 3-point generation, we were trying to do this virtually. And now we play basketball the way we used to play video games, where everything is just fast and it's threes and shit like that. But obviously Boston does it at a much more sophisticated level.